the Talent Experience podcast featuring authentic conversations on the future of work.
Empowering you to better understand and deliver a best-in-class, future-proofed career experience.
For more insightful conversations, visit talentexperiencepodcast.com.
We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, I'm Rhonda Taylor, and I'm with the Talent Experience. This podcast addresses all issues in the talent space. And today I have a friend, a colleague from the past, and a trailblazer, Jennifer Dole. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rhonda. I'm excited to be here today.
Oh, Jen, we're excited to have you because you have got such a wealth of knowledge. You've sat in the HR professional seat, I don't know for how long, but a significant length of time. You saw what it was like to have technology presented to the HR department. You saw what it was like to get the buy-in from your fellow colleagues to buy technology. And now you're sitting on the other side as an analyst. And you're doing some tremendous work. So that's why you're here today, Jen.
Thank you. It really is a story of career resilience, right? Being able to pivot and use the same skills over and over again.
Yes. And Jen, did I miss anything in my introduction? No.
I think the only thing that I want to add to that is, I look at my work right now as I get to tell stories of HR leaders that are having impact. And that's what really kind of, makes me jump out of bed in the morning, is to be able to hear those stories and tell those stories.
Yeah. And that keeps you motivated, I bet.
It sure does. I mean, HR people are some of the smartest people I know. And it's a great experience to be able to tell their story.
Yeah. And today we're diving into a recent paper that you did with Dr. Stephen Hunt. I think the paper is titled "The Next Era of Organizational Restructuring: What We Can Do and Should Do Differently." So we quickly got a briefing on it, and we talked about it. And I looked the paper up, and I have a couple of questions. And first of all, I think I just want to get something clarified because, I live in the world of change management, and then I read the paper about organizational restructuring. Can you share with the audience what the difference is between the two?
Yeah, I think it's worthy of a definition, right? So within the paper, we define it as restructuring is any action that significantly changes the roles and reporting structure of employees within an organization. So it's a little bit different than workforce change because it emphasizes changing roles.
Right. There's a lot of employee dynamics going on in change management.
For sure. And restructuring really takes on three forms, right? There's the most common one that we're hearing about today, which is economic. It's to save workforce costs. It comes in the form of layoffs. And we're hearing kind of loud layoffs right now, right? In the headlines. The second type of restructuring is really operational, where we see companies increasing their strategic alignment. Typically, that's through merger and acquisitions. And then finally is organic restructuring, which is really designed to support the employee career interests and often takes the shape of internal mobility.
Right. Wanted to touch first on the first type of restructuring, the economic. And I think it's because we're hearing of all these tech companies laying off.
Oh,
but yet
it's so visible, Rhonda, so visible and painful.
Help me understand what's going on in this restructuring, quote unquote. Example, Microsoft or even Amazon. Amazon laid off all these people, yet they have like 10,000 job wrecks. And this is not counting the people in the warehouse. So where is this restructuring coming from, or do we even know?
Yeah, I think we see the headlines right now in the tech industry. And I think just in the last couple months, there's been 200,000 tech workers laid off, really because of some overhiring activity. And it's making the headlines, right? And it's CEOs are sharing their internal letters to employees with the world, and employees are posting about it on LinkedIn and TikTok videos, and it's just really become highly visible. But restructuring really has some questionable benefits.
Yeah, we will see down the road.
We sure will, because it's not just going to be about the people that leave the workforce through layoffs, but certainly it's about the workforce that survives those layoffs and what they do, right? Can they recover, or are they going to be turnover? And research shows that laying off 1% of your workforce leads to 31% increases in involuntary turnover. So
right.
This isn't over, to your point.
A level of insecurity, eh? Yeah. Jen, restructuring is becoming more common, as we just spoke about, questionable and visible. We just spoke about the questionable ones. What are your feelings about there are ones that are not visible, and can you just give us an example of them?
Yeah, so those visible and questionable and restructuring that's happening is really around layoffs. But restructuring is broader than that, right? It also takes the form of operational regarding the mergers and acquisitions, or it can take the form of organic, where employees are really choosing to change roles. And on a recent roundtable with 25 HR executives, Steve Hunt and I talked about this with them, and we wanted to know the current state. The current state that they talked to us about was restructuring is becoming more the way that they work. They're constantly tightening their belt. It's part of the ebb and the flow of things. It is, they're restructuring and changing jobs all the time, and they're building the capabilities of their workforce to go through that business transformation. So these are the stories that aren't making the headlines, Rhonda.
Jen, what are some of the common problems with restructuring? And does it need to be the way that they are? And what are, we know that job insecurity is one of them. Well, what are other problems that come along with restructuring?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, focused on the restructuring that's just part of life, the ebb and flow of business. But HR leaders not only want to make it more effective, but they want to be more empathetic in the process. They do want to be able to retain their people. They do want people to rally around where they're going and what they're doing. And so many of the leaders that we spoke to are the employee experience is top of mind for them. And we were able to expand that in that it's not just the employee experience, but it's the manager's experience and the team's experience as well. And so some of the problems that we see it is a disruption to operations, right? An employee decides to take on a different position, or there's a merger and acquisition with new people coming in. But how do you backfill jobs? How do you create new jobs? This becomes a disruption. also, if you're not doing it well, there can be perceived unfairness, right? People saying like, hey, wait a minute, I didn't know that that job was open or that that was possible. So these are some of the problems that come up with organic restructuring or operational restructuring that we can and should solve for.
And that's where technology often steps in.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And there's lots of different technology that can help solve those problems. Certainly talent marketplace, opportunity marketplace, but it expands beyond that, right? So employee listening and skills and
Succession planning.
Succession planning and development and even performance management and adjusting goals as the business is changing.
Yeah. And business is changing, and we're seeing the internal talent mobility market grow. How is that part of the restructuring process that's going on in the employee workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question, because one of the examples that came up in the conversation we were having with the HR leaders was they have one of the companies has a no layoff policy. And so what that means in practice is that they look at the way they work and the roles that they have, and then they know that they've got changing business conditions and changing strategy, and they're moving people around based on their skills to those new strategies. People are electing based on their interest to go work on those new strategies. So why aren't the headlines full of those stories, Rhonda?
Oh yeah, and like Jen, when we were in the workplace, upskilling was an LMS. And now we're learning that there are stronger ways, mentoring, coaching, gigs, just all kinds of different types of upskilling. And we're finding
often, sorry to cut you off, but so often, and for so many years, we've talked about the 70-20-10 model, right? And that learning is what is it? Classroom learning, online learning is only 10%, right? It's that experiential learning that's 70%. And that's what the internal mobility really gets at.
That's right. And, we're seeing that so relevant in today's employee world. But there's another thing I wanted to speak about, and leadership is having to take a look at succession planning. Succession planning, days gone by, was something that you thought about for C-suite.
Mm-hmm.
That's changed, right?
It sure has. I, as a practitioner, ran succession planning for Fortune 500s, and we were focused on high potentials. And it was just a small percentage of the organization. And now what we find is people wanting to go deeper into their organization for succession planning. They want to touch on all levels because there's so much hidden talent in an organization.
And some of the lower skills are very important to the operation of the organization. And I think great example that I can think of that really opened my eyes to this was a large company that was in the healthcare world, and during COVID, they had warehouses, and if a forklift driver didn't show up one day or got COVID for 2 weeks, it disrupted all the processes in the warehouse. So there was a succession plan right down to the forklift drivers.
Amazing. It's so important, really, to give people lots of opportunities, and that everyone sees a future within the organization. That's what really builds the confidence as you're going through these restructuring changes, that people at all levels can see that future.
Jen, restructuring is such a, it's almost like, a company has to admit we're not doing something right. And, it's like some people can't see the forest for the trees. There's always a core in the company that says, oh, we have to restructure. But then the rest of the management team doesn't see the problem. How do you proceed in getting a buy-in for restructuring?
Yeah. And, I think when people talk about restructuring, they just have this allergic reaction to it, right?
Exactly.
And you have these images of people being laid off and it's traumatic and you're losing work relationships and how are you going to get things done? Restructuring doesn't have to just be that anymore, Rhonda, right? So the mergers and acquisitions is a form of restructuring that can be positive when you bring two organizations together and you combine their skills for the strategy. Restructuring can be organic, where people are moving from, lower demand business strategies to higher demand business strategies. So maybe it's just about like changing the image of restructuring and normalizing it a little bit more.
Yeah. Jen, we just touched the tip of the iceberg. Like we really haven't got into the meat of it all. Another day, I hope.
I hope so too. I enjoyed this.
Yeah. Jen Dole from 360 Insights. Thank you for being our guest on the Talent Experience.
Thank you, Rhonda.
This is Rhonda Taylor saying goodbye and have yourself a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Talent Experience podcast.
For more talent experience and future of work conversations, visit talentexperiencepodcast.com.
Follow us on Twitter at TalentXPodcast.
Or join the conversation with #Talent Experience Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter.
The Talent Experience podcast was brought to you by the fabulous Fuelies at Fuel 50.